Hi everyone, my name is Adawgz and thank you all for coming to my channel. So today we'll be going over a Tachikaze premium deck profile, and with that out of the way, let's jump into the profile. So we'll start off with the grade 0s and then make our way all the way up to the grade 3s. So first of all, with the Elemental Institute, I think we all know what this card does by now, so I'm not going to bother reading it. We do run 2 draw Gs, we run 3 standards, 4 hill guards, a total of 6 crit, 4 being a stride crit, 1 being a sentinel crit, and the 1 also being an Intersoul Diva Vanguard plus 10k crit. And then we do run a trigger, we do run 1 child, and then we do run data. So we will go over the standard, the over, and the little Toronto and explain why we run these cards specifically. So with the Cold Magnum, we'll go over the skill first. So auto GB1, you can put this card on your deck. When this unit is put into the drop zone from Vanguard circle during your turn, you may pay the cost. If you do, draw a card, shoot it to one of your other units, and it gets plus 5k power into the turn and shuffle your deck. So the reason why we run Cold Magnum, first of all, is that our big Vanguards have the Engorge ability. How Engorge works is that when it attacks, you need to retire something. So Cold Magnum is a good target for this, as it breaks even, being able to draw a card when it's retired, but then we can also give something 5k, so we can actually help make a magic number. Do keep in mind as well, we can actually give the Vanguard the plus 5 if we wanted to as well. Secondly, the reason why we run free Cold Magnum in this deck is that when we literally close the deck out, usually we have 2 or 1, maybe 2 or 1 card left in the deck, we can do a thing called a Cold Magnum loop. So how the Cold Magnum loop works is that, just say we have all 3 Cold Magnums in our hand, we call a Cold Magnum, then we call a Cold Magnum over the Cold Magnum, that Sandra goes to the drop. Now it is seen to retire, it has been retired, so we put it in the bottom of the deck, we draw 1, we choose one of the units, gets plus 5k power, and then we shuffle our deck. So essentially we now just say we had just say for example you only had 1 card in our deck. Cold Magnum has removed that last card, and because we have now the other 2 Cold Magnum in hand, we continue the loop, which means we can give all our units infinite power, and it's actually a way to really end the game from there. But again, do keep in mind you need to be close to deck out, and the Cold Magnum loop can be a little bit hard to set up, as you need to make sure you actually have the 3 Cold Magnums in your hand. But if you do pull off, it is essentially a game ender. Whenever I managed to pull the loop off, it's been absolutely devastating, and I think maybe only 1 time I actually did not win with the loop. Every other game that I managed to get to it, I won. So it's a very, very strong thing to have, so definitely keep that in mind, and maybe if you can, maybe test those things. As I said, this Cold Magnum loop is very, very strong. Next, we run 1 over trigger. The reason why we run the elemental over trigger is that the deck draws a lot, and it also gauges a lot. So how a quick gauge works is when the usually when a unit attacks or when something is placed, you pretty much put the top card of your deck and put it under a regard face down as the equip gauge. So because with all the drawing and the equip gauge as well, we go for a deck very quickly. So the Dragon Empire over trigger is actually pretty bad, as by hitting it sometimes we can potentially deck out, or we generally just don't attack again with our Vanguard, depending on how much cards left in the deck. Also, depending on which stride we're going to, if we swing and for example hit the over trigger, it can actually be very detrimental, as we actually can't swing a bit again. I'll explain that later on when we get to it. But yeah, so it's very counterproductive. Plus, these over triggers actually been really nice anyway, as again with technically 2 of our strides, we can kind of bring back regards, or we can actually have regards that stand. So by using this specific over trigger, if we use a certain stride which we're going to, we have the ability to stand our attack of our regards and actually stand them. So by giving the 100 million to 2 of our regards that can attack and stand, we actually get 4 units that can swing with 100 million power. That's a very, very strong thing to have. So that's why we do run the Cray Elemental Overtrigger. Next we run One Child Little Tyranno. So it has auto forerunner, we don't worry about that. And then auto GB1, you can counterblast 1, put this card into your soul. And then when this unit is retired from the rearguard circle for the effect or cost of your Vanguard with the Engorge ability, you may pay the cost. So if you do, look at 4 cards on top of your deck, pull up the 2 cards with different card names from among them to rearguard circle, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So just kind of like Whole Magnum, it helps us break even. Actually no, helps us actually plus a little bit more as we get to call 2 rearguards out. The reason why this is nice is that we can create some extra attack extenders and potentially pretty much act as a rearguard for our Vanguard to give all the triggers to if they potentially guard our Vanguard. So we can actually still have a strong rearguard. But this also does work very well in tandem with the new stride from the Premium Collection. So I'll go over that when we get into later on during the video. But Little Tyranno is actually just very nice. Again, just nice attack extender, and yeah, it's just an overall nice card. So for the grade 1s, we do run 2 Terra, 4 Savage Shooter, 4 Blue Sprint, and 3 Prison Brew. So the Raven Terra, it has the Engorge ability and Vanguard rearguard, so we don't really worry about that. But its second skill, Auto GB1, you can Soul Blast 1, and then when the unit is retired from rearguard circle for the effect or cost of your Vanguard with the Engorge ability, you pay the cost. If you do, call it to rearguard circle, and if the number of face-up cards in your damage zone is 1 or less, countercharge 1. This is essentially the countercharge of the deck, but also this is a card that's always a recurring body. As long as we retire it with our Vanguard with the Engorge ability. So it is nice to have a little extra little extenders in the deck, as I said, being able to do little pokes, and then after doing little pokes, being able to core stuff back and potentially make our rearguards bigger depending on what our Vanguard gets with our drive checks. It's a very nice thing to have. So Rare Terra is definitely a solid 2-off. Again, a body that always comes back, and then also a nice countercharge in deck too. Do keep in mind you can actually use this skill quite a few times in one turn if you can set it up, so just do keep that in mind. Next we have 4 Savage Shooter. This is definitely a very, very powerful card. So it has 2 skills, so Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed, you can Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and call a card from your hand to rearguard circle. And then put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for that called unit. And then the second skill is Active Rearguard Circle. You can rest this unit and put a card from your drop zone face down as a equip gauge for one of the other rearguards from an equip gauge. But the second skill works very well in tandem with a couple other cards, which we'll get to them shortly when we get to there. But the first skill I definitely want to point out with why this card is really good. So we do run a grade 3 in our deck called Savage Mercenary. Now this card cannot be rode, and it cannot attack if it does not have if none of the units in the column of this unit have a quick gauge. So what we can do is, say even we go first or second, if we have a Savage Mercenary in our hand straight from grade 1, we can ride Savage Shooter to then call out the Savage Mercenary, and that way straight from the bat we actually have a 27k attack straight from grade 1. So going second, we have a very powerful grade 1 game here if we have to go second, and then also a very powerful grade 2 game as well. So, and because the Savage Mercenary is 27k, usually the opponent is on grade 1, for example, if they're at 8k, a 15k shield is not enough. It would only make them 23, which means they'd be forced to commit quite a few cards to stop this mercenary. So most of the time, the opponent is probably just going to take the mercenary attack, which means it's actually a way to actually get some free damage in really earlier on, so that when we get to our first strike, we can actually kill the opponent on our first strike. So that's why we run Savage Shooter, and I said I'll go over its second skill when we get here. So next we run 3 Blue Sprint. So on the Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, when it's attached, you may put 1 card from the top of your deck face down as a quick gauge for one of the other rearguards. And then auto, when the student is retired from Rearguard Circle for your card's ability, you can call up to one of the students equip gauge to Rearguard Circle, and you may put one card from the top of your deck face down as an equip gauge for that unit. And this ability may be used by a card with the same card name once per turn. So you can use the skill once per turn, with the second skill being able to retire and call something back that's under the blueprint. So when I was talking about Savage Shooter before, I said you're able to rest itself to put cards from your drop as a equip gauge onto Rearguards. So Blue Sprint is a prime target for it, as again, if we have a Adawgz grade 2 or something that we want to put under the Blue Sprint, so we guaranteed a good body, this can allow us to do it. So we can essentially just say our mercenary is retired. We can actually use the shooter to rest it to put a mercenary under the Blue Sprint. So then when the Blue Sprint dies, it calls it the mercenary and gives it a gauge. There is another grade 2 that works very well with shooter as well. We have one Blue Sprint and another grade 2, Regiodon, which has the same ability as Blueprint, so that we can kind of maximize our cores and we're always getting the best cores possible. The first skill, being able to create gauge, is very important as well, as one of our strides gives us the ability to either retire Rearguards or gauge. So if we have a certain amount of gauge and stuff set up, we can actually use the gauge as fuel for our Vanguard skill. But it's also really subtle as well, again being able to set up gauge under themselves so that they can just be retired for our Vanguard skill, so then we can call another body out when they are retired. So they're definitely very flexible cards, and you definitely at least want to be running at least 3 copies of Blue Sprint and Regiodon. I probably wouldn't go any lower than that. It's just a very, very solid card. Next, we run free Prison Bow. So it's placed on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle from hand. You can look at 5 cards on top of your deck, reveal up to 1 grade 3 from among them, and put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you've got a card in your hand, discard a card from your hand, and then continue on the Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. If a new equipped gauge was put for your unit this turn, this one gets plus 5,000 power. So the second skill is very easily achievable to become a 13k body, as long as you can make a new equipped gauge, which, as you've probably seen already, we make a lot of equipped gauge already, so very easy to hit. Then the second skill, being able to search for cards like the Mercenary, as well as our main right target, which is the Spino Driver and the Spino Driver Reverse. The Spino Driver is a bit more important than Reverse on the first grade 3, but we'll go over and explain why that is the case when we get to the grade 3s. So we do run free Prison Bird. So I'm not really talking Regiodon, it does the exact same skill as Bruce. Next we do have 3 Dial Pyro. So it has 2 skills, so it's on the Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When it's placed from hand, you can counterblast 1 to a card, and call a card from your hand to Rearguard Circle, and you may put the top card of your deck face down as a equip gauge for that unit. And an Order and Rearguard Circle, when placed from an equip gauge, this unit gets plus 10,000 power to the turn. So this is a very, very solid card. First of all, being able to call a card from hand when it's placed in either Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, because we can essentially call a Chavez Mercenary if for some reason we didn't find a mercenary on a grade 1. Dial Pyro is our pretty much like a next in line to actually help get that mercenary out. So that's why we do run free of the Dial Pyro. Because again, we want to guarantee to get mercenary out as quick as possible in the early game, so we can start pushing damage really hard. And then its second skill, again, this does work very well in tandem with the Savage Shooter. The reason why is that the Savage Shooter can put Dial Pyro under just a Regiodon or Blue Sprint, so that when Blue Sprint or Regiodon is retired, when Dial Pyro comes out, it actually gets plus 10,000 power, so we can actually set up a strong body. So for example, just saying in grade 2 we have a Savage Shooter, we have a Mercenary up, we have like a Regiodon or Blue Sprint. Essentially what we can do is, if for some reason we have a Dial Pyro and drop, we can rest the Savage Shooter to put a Dial Pyro under our Regiodon and Blue Sprint, whatever it is there on the grade 2. So then if we have a Rearguard that can retire, which we do have a grade 2 that can retire, we can get multi-attacks, which is very, very strong in the early game. So Dalifaro is definitely very flexible, being able to again make some hand, be able to cheat out big beaters early on, and then also act as a strong beater if it is put under a Regidon or Blue Sprint, so it can call itself out. Well, since the Blue Sprint and Regidon can call the Dalifaro out, sorry. Next we have 4 Ravenous Dragon Mega Rex. So auto on the Vanguard and Regard circle, when it attacks a Vanguard, you can retire another Regard and draw a card. If the unit is on Regard circle, you can counterblast 1 to put the top card of your deck face down and equip gauge for this unit, and it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the battle for each of these units' equip gauge. So this can definitely be a very solid Vanguard ride, because essentially what we can do is, if we're trying to stay on grade 2 for a while, because we want to make sure we can get to grade 3 first so we can stride, Mega Rex essentially just acts as a it kind of acts as kind of like a twin drive, a pseudo twin drive, since you can draw one and then you also get your drive checked. So again, it can also sack your cards like a Regidon and your Blue Sprint, so if you somehow manage to hit good cards under them, Mega Rex can sack them instead during the grade 2 game, so that we can actually extend our attacks. So it's definitely a very nice card to have, and if we somehow manage to open multiple Mega Rexes, we can actually start, drawing more cards, try to create more value, and then it can also act as a very strong beat stick and Regard circle. Just again, being able to use cards like Regidon and Blue Sprint, even Savage Shooter, just to increase Mega Rex's gauge count, so he can be a very big beater as well. So it's definitely a very strong card, definitely a 4-off in this deck. Again, he can also act as a nice attacking center, for your tires, and maybe it on in Blue Sprint too. I think I've already gone over that, but yeah, just a nice card overall. So we've gone over the Savage Mercenary, so we'll go over the Spina Driver and then the Spina Driver Reverse. So first of all, we do have 4 copies of Ancient Dragon Spina Driver. So its first skill is when it attacks from Vanguard circle or is rode upon, you can counterblast 1 and retire 2 Regards and get an imaginary gift Axel, draw a card, use a card from your hand, call it Regard circle, then choose 2 of the units and it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. And the second skill on the Regard circle, when your drive check reveals a trigger unit, you can put the top card of your deck face down and equip gauge for this unit. So Spina Driver is definitely a very solid card, being able to generate extra Axel markers if we need to, just so we can pretty much widen our board to get more multi-attacks in. So for example, if we do have to widen for some reason, maybe the opponent just somehow had a stronger early game than us, we can kind of use Ryan Spina Driver, try and set up a board, get some multi-attacks, kind of generate some extra draw power with making the gift and drawing a card as well, and then being able to shoot against even 5k power, so you can actually make some magic numbers. So Spina Driver is definitely very solid in that regard, but it gets even crazier if we ride Spina Driver and then next turn be able to ride Spina Driver Reverse. So we're only looking at Spina Driver's first skill here, which is when it's placed on Vanguard circle, you can perform draw a card, and choose a card from your hand, and call it to Regard circle, and put the top card of your deck face down as a equip gauge for that unit 1 time. And if you have an Ancient Dragon Spina Driver in your soul, you can perform it 3 times instead. So if you already rode your Spina Driver, and then you have a Spina Driver Reverse in your hand the next turn, when you ride the Spina Driver, you get to essentially draw 3, call 3, and then give those 3 cards gauge. This card is absolutely silly. This essentially helps us set up, depending on what we have a hand, set up a really great turn for our Premium Collection stride, but it also helps set up a pretty much costless Neberos turn. And I'll explain what Neberos is as well, but yeah, Spina Driver Reverse is a very, very strong card. But the only reason why you run it at 2 copies is because it kind of works a little bit later on in the game, as we need to have a spinal driver installed first. But when we get to that, the payoff is absolutely insane. So that's why we run 2 copies. It's great when we actually get to it. Righty, so that is the main deck. Now we will go into the G-Zone. So we'll start off with the Giganto Pharaoh. So it has 2 skills. So the Vanguard Circle has Engorge, and then also auto on the Vanguard Circle. When a unit becomes engorged, you can cost counter +1 and turn a card from your G-Zone face up. Choose the same number of your regards as the number of units retired by this unit's ability this turn, and until the end of the turn, they get plus 10,000 power and auto regard once per turn. At the end of the battle this unit attacked, you can swap +1 and stand this unit. So, what you can do, essentially, is if you have regards that can be retired so they can recur stuff, what Giganto Pharaoh can do, you can gorge, retire all the regards that you need to reset your board. Then once the board has been reset, you use Giganto Pharaoh's skill to counter +1 to the card from use and face up, and then choose regards up to the number of cards that have been retired. So for example, if you set up a Blueprint, Regiodon, and what was the other card? The Raven Terra, and just say the Lord Sereno, say we've tried, 4, just for example. We engorge first, then once we engorge, we proc all their abilities, make a new board, and then essentially the Giganto Pharaoh will give them the ability to Soul +1 as long as they Soul +1 and then reset it, but they also get plus 10k power. So essentially how we want to plan this out is, to go into the stride, is essentially we want to have a few recursion cards set up so that we can get Giganto Pharaoh's effect off at maximum value, pretty much. So this card is more like, most of the time it's more of a later stage of the game kind of card. It isn't always necessarily our first stride, because we don't actually have multiple ways to set up regards that can be retired to gain Giganto Pharaoh's maximum effect. But usually in second stride, we should legitimately have all the cards we need to go into the Giganto Pharaoh, as we dig through our deck a lot, we've gauged a lot and stuff as well. So most of the time, it can be a solid second stride. This might not always be the best second stride. Sometimes it might be one that's a bit better, but still though, this is an absolutely silly card. As I said, this can also set up really well with Spino Driver Reverse. Again, as long as we wrote over Spino Driver, again, being able to call 3, draw 3, and then gauge 3. So if we call 3 cards that have recursion abilities, we've set up this essentially for Giganto Pharaoh for literally doing next to nothing. So as you can see why the Spino Driver Reverse is very, very strong with this stripe specifically, but also it's very strong with the Gliding Nebros. So you probably can't see its skill too much, but I'll read the skill anyway. I can kind of see it. So it's auto Vanguard Circle Engorge, and then auto Vanguard Circle when it is engorged, you can choose 2 of the opponent's regards and retire them, and turn a card from your G-Zone face up, put a total of 5 of your regards or equipped gauges to drop 7 and stand this unit. So Nebros is usually our first stride. It's essentially a very strong Vanguard. We can generally swing for 27, then stand if we pay the cost, as a cost of retiring 5 regards or equipped gauges combined, stand it, to swing again. And the great thing what I like about this card too is that it doesn't lose its drive once it stands. But you can see as well why the Nebros doesn't actually work well with the Dragon Empire Overtrigger, as again, if we use Nebros skill and stand it, and then we hit the Overtrigger, it does nothing. So that's why we run the Frame and not the Overtrigger. Do keep in mind as well the Engorge ability, same thing as the Premium Stride. We can engorge the Vanguard first, engorge as many we need to if we need to, and then call out our regards as well. But most of the time we might just engorge one, usually maybe with the Patera, because we can call the Patera back to give a counter charge and get our body back. and then use Neburo's skill to kind of retire regards, hopefully have a couple of regards that can replace themselves, so that if the opponent PGs the Vanguard, which most of the time they might, we can start giving the powers through our regards, so we actually have regard to hit numbers too. So this card is definitely solid, very nice overall. And then does have the second skill in the G zone once per turn. If this card is face up, you can soul +1, put a card from the top of your deck down to the quick gauge in front of your regards, and it becomes engorged to the turn. That second skill doesn't really come up. I think the quick gauge thing, I think it's going to become like once or twice, but most of the time we don't really use Neburo's second skill. Just maybe using its first skill, just doing 2 Vanguard attacks and getting I want to say maybe like 5, sometimes 6 regular attacks. So we have 10 attacks overall, being one big one and a couple of small ones, or potentially big ones if we still have our mercenary on board. So Neburo is definitely a good stride start on the deck. You can definitely start putting on the pressure. Next we have Adawgz. So it has Vanguard Circle, Regular Circle, Engorged, and GB2, choose a face down card called himself, turn it face up. This unit becomes engorged if the number of units retired during this turn due to the effect of this engorged ability is 3 or more. You may pay the cost of the unit, gets plus 10,000 power, and then order the Vanguard Circle once per turn. At the end of the battle, this unit attacks. If the number of units during this turn due to the effect of this engorged ability is 5 or more, you can send this unit and get stride bonus 1 during the turn. So this essentially can become a stronger Gluttony, become a stronger Neburo's. Just do keep in mind as well that Gluttony Adawgz doesn't allow you to choose both retires and gauges. It only retires. So you'd want to make sure you actually do have an adequate amount of regards to retire to get Gluttony Adawgz's full effect off. It can definitely be a lot stronger than Neburo's, but the fact that it gets the plus 10k, so it actually is swinging for 37, so it's swinging for an even bigger number. But again, if you do have like a Blue Sprint Regiodon set up as well, or maybe the Patera, you can still get some solid multi-attacks off it as well. So it is a still a very, very strong stride. Sometimes Gluttony Adawgz might be better than the Premium stride, but there are times as well, maybe the Premium stride is better than the Gluttony Adawgz. But again, both are very, very strong strides. So yeah, definitely 2 cards in this deck. I still feel like you just need to run 2 just in case it happens, just trying to make a really big Vanguard. And the second thing I forgot to say as well is that it is, I wouldn't say costless because it has higher regards, but it doesn't really cost any counterblast at all or CB. So that also can determine whether you go into the Gigantofellow or the Gluttony Adawgz. So again, 2 copies, Gluttony Adawgz, still very strong card. We don't typically go into Adawgz anymore, I just still have it in this deck. So order Mega GB3, when your regards tied by this unit, you may pay the cost counterblast 1. If you do, call the card a Regular Circle, that unit this unit gets plus 3k power until that turn. So you don't typically really use them too much anymore. As I said, the Gigantofellow kind of, I kind of want to see kind of crypt him out as the other stride, the Premium stride, just does so much more for so much less resources. But yeah, I honestly don't know why I switched him in there, but it's essentially just fodder, to be honest, at this stage. But yeah, so we do run 1 guy down as the deck. Next we do have 2 Gaia Devastate. So it has Engorged on the Vanguard Circle, and then second skill order Vanguard Circle, you can +1, introduce a face down card with the same card as this unit from your G zone and turn it face up. When this unit comes engorged, you may pay the cost. If you do, draw a card, choose up to any 2 circles other than Vanguard Circle for each face up card in your G zone, put all the cards on those circles into the drop, and if the number of cards put in the drop zone is 3 or more, this unit gets plus 10,000 power, plus 1 drive, and plus a crit. So this stride is kind of very situational. It just depends on what your matchups are. So a good matchup, for example, you use the Gaia Devastate on is Regalia. Now usually Regalia's reguards can't be retired because of being sure of the Idrisil's effect. But Gaia Devastate bypasses that, just being able to retire the circles, so those reguards can still die. So sometimes a Gaia Devastate can be much more, pun not intended, more devastating than maybe going into maybe the Gluttony Dogma or the other Premium Stride, just pretty much trying to wipe their board and still have pressure, since your Vanguard has a quad drive and a crit and plus 10k power. Again, if you need to as well, if you do have to retire some of your reguards, you can still get some extra attack extenders to Reggie on Blue Sprint, so do keep it in mind. It's technically not too bad if you have to go into him, but yeah, it's just very situational, but you have him there in case it does come up. You just want to make sure that you have, pretty much just want to make sure that you have a answer for any situation that comes up. And then lastly, the last stride is the GP8. So it has a Vanguard Circle engorged, and then GP8, when your reguards retired, you can choose up to one of your opponent's reguards, retire it, choose one of your reguards in that unit, and this unit get plus 10k power until the end of the turn. So we do have ways of retiring like reguards or reguard effects. Again, we do have the Mega Rex that can sack reguards, so that we can get a couple of extra attack extenders. But what I do like about this card as well is essentially this can just pop off the whole time, the opponent's entire board. You know, you just keep attacking, do some extra extenders depending on how many like Mega Rex stuff you have. Make your Mega Rexes bigger too. It can just work overall, and just make bigger reguards and just block the opponent's board. I probably maybe used this stride maybe once or twice, but I think the reason why I might have only gone into it might have been because the version maybe like golds or something. Pretty much, I was essentially just trying to pop their board, and this was just much stronger than the Gaia Devastate. I did win the event, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, you don't typically get into him because GB8's kind of far, and again, this deck usually decks out on second or potentially third stride. Sometimes you might get close to deck out on second stride, so sometimes the GB8 won't come up, but I still have it just for those little scenarios, so just do keep that in mind. So we just run one GB8. And then for the G-Guards, so we do run 2 Blockade Gunga, so you can choose choose one of your reguards, retire it, then when it is placed in Guardian Circle, you pay the cost. If you do, it gets plus 10,000 power, plus 10,000 shields in the battle. And you can choose up to 2 of your reguards, and until the end of the turn they get, when it is retired, return this card to your hand. So you can essentially use this to maybe detect a couple of reguards. It's kind of like a worse, kind of like a not as good as a Dismal, because you know they can still be bound if they get bound or spin back to the bottom of the deck. But in some scenarios where you know the reguards can be retired, you can just use this to kind of protect them, and then when they're retired, add them back to hand. So you kind of make make like a little bit of an extra hand if you need to, but it does come up from time to time, so just to keep it in mind. Blockade Gunga is still nice, again, just a nice 10k body, a nice 24k shot. So sorry, we do want to Blockade Gunga. We do run 2 copies of Polish Primer. For its place in Guardian Circle, you can choose a face down G-Guard from your G-Zone to a face up, and this unit gets plus 5,000 shield until the end of battle for each of your open circles. So this can actually become a very, very big G-Guard, bigger than all our G-Guards, depending on what we have. So if our board for some reason is cleared, generally we have around 7 open circles, typically sometimes maybe 6, but just say we do have the 7 circles open, this gets plus 35k shield. So that is a 50k shield. That is a very, very big G-Guard. So that's why we do run 2 Polish Primer. but then we also do have 2 regal Garda. So with this placing Garden Circle, you can try any number of regards and it gets plus 10 key shield until the end of the battle for each unit for this cost. And then you can draw a card for each unit with a kit gauge retire for this cost. So sometimes we do get into scenarios where we actually do have some regards, maybe with a little bit of excess gauge on board, so we can actually use that to retire those regards to draw cards. So for example, prime example is maybe the boost from Regidon. If we somehow have those on the board, we can essentially retire them and then draw cards to them, and also you gain that shield power. But a little combo you can do is, if you use the Gunga, you can give the Gunga to Blue Sprint and Regidon, so then they have the skill and the retire with in the hand. So then you can actually G-Gun to the Regal Garda, retire those regards, they'll go back to hand because of your Gunga. You'll pretty much draw off your Regal Gardas, and then you also add those cards back again from your Gunga. So you essentially have 4 extra cards in hand, and you also make a dummy fixed shield with Regal Garda. That's kind of like a little combo you can do with G-Guards. And I believe that's pretty much everything. So I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll answer them the best that I can. And yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy, and Adawgz out. See ya.